not answering questions with waptek. I want to point out something for anybody who's not aware of it. A 6,000% increase in something. Okay, what's a 100% increase? That means that you've gone from having $100 to $200, or 100 people sick to 200 people. That's a 100% increase. That is also the same as having one person sick and having 2 people become sick. That's a 100% increase. A 6,000% increase means a 1 to 60 change. That means you could go from one person who's communicable to 60, or one person who has been arrested in your entire city in the last year for doing something illegal to 60. That's still a 6,000% increase in crime, but it's gone from one person to 60 people. Unless you know the initial starting point, it doesn't mean anything. And some of you may have seen that there's a 6,000% increase or some other rather frightening number like that without telling you what the starting point was, and maybe not even telling you how many days, weeks, years, or decades this 6,000% or 60 to 1 increase has happened. A 1,000% increase means 10 times. Okay. In the 1990s, a national early warning system to detect potential safety problems was put in effect for the medical system. A specific part of it, called the Vaccine Adverse Reporting System, VAERS. It's a database. And you'll find people not telling you that what they're measuring is something from 1990 to today. It's a lot like people telling you that there are 600,000 missing persons in the United States every year. No, there's a total of 600,000 missing persons on the missing persons file list of the number of incidents of people being declared missing for a decade. And then they don't mention the other part of it is it shows almost the same number being found within a month or two, and the rest of them being found within 6 months, and a total of chronically missing or truly missing individuals being a very tiny number. That is used for the belief system that people get lost in the woods all the time. It's a very well understood thing that if you don't tell people all of the parameters, they will use their imaginations to fill things in. And you'll technically not be lying to them. So what does the VAERS database show as far as the total number of people having these medical problems at all? It doesn't specify when you look up the report thought you were looking up of how long ago they were, or whether it's associated with the current year or decade. 3 reports of blood clots and low platelets. Usually blood clots and high platelet count go together, so that's considered unusual. 3 reports, that's 3 people. 49 confirmed reports of thrombosis and thrombocytopenia syndrome, TTS. If you're not aware of it, that first part, thrombosis, that's also the technical term for hemorrhoids. I'm not kidding you. That's literally... for one of the versions of it. But this is about the vaccine adverse reporting system. Yes, but you're not told what time period. But there's 49 cases in some time frame that someone won't tell you about. Did they? 233 preliminary reports of Guillain-Barré syndrome, GBS. But you weren't told the time frame, were you? And it says vaccine adverse reporting system. It doesn't say COVID-19 vaccine reporting system. There isn't a separate database. The database is for every vaccine or everything that involves immunization. It could be an immunization against a bacterial infection. It could be a person having an adverse reaction that has nothing to do with it. These are reports by people and by hospitals. The ones that are done specifically for vaccines for the current pandemic are added into it, but they are different parameters. Every single complaint has to be put in. whether it has any merit or not, whether or not it's a person trying to get a court case through and doesn't care about facts, whether or not it was resolved and found that the person had falsified it and never had a vaccination of any kind. People, in some cases, if you're not aware of it, I'm going to bring this up, people who have children that have strongly detrimental medical problems, like having, they're not easy to take care of. That gets blamed on vaccines that in some cases the children never had. Well, it was caused by the vaccines because you were told by your lawyer that this is essentially a cash cow. If you file a complaint, it is a presumption that you're telling the truth and a presumption you should get a payout of a specific amount of money. But then they get to where they have to file another court case or file a case, and then it gets taken back from them because they falsified a report of having a vaccine. I understand some of you may not get this, but some of you out there have to take care of children that have a lot of developmental disabilities or birth defects. And blaming it on a vaccine is it's a deep pocket for some people. For other people, it's totally legit. I've had a vaccine reaction in my life once. It made me itchy and I felt bad for a couple of days. It was a negative response. Didn't file anything because it was better than whatever medical problem it was preventing, which used to be the criteria. If a vaccination causes you less problems than the most mild incident of what you're taking care of, measles, mumps, rubella, if it was nowhere near as bad as the chickenpox I had, it was nowhere near as bad as chickenpox, they didn't want to take a report because, no, you benefited from this. It's if you have problems later. I got chickenpox eventually. It wasn't anywhere near as bad as it could have been. It was a pretty severe case, ending up as shingles, which is pretty bad. And now you can get a vaccine against shingles. As soon as I can get it, I will, but I've already had shingles, and I was told by a doctor, no, you don't need to do that. 8,878 reported deaths either a day after a vaccine, week after, months later, or a year after. That last one strongly indicates that the list you may be looking up and found this video for has nothing whatsoever to do with a vaccine we've only had in place for 8 months. But then that kind of propagandist isn't going to tell you that it's a report of a death that happened before the fucking virus came out, much less a vaccine for it. After 408 million vaccine doses given out as of October 18th, 2021, and out of 736,000 deaths, and 45.4 million people being infected, you actually have a total, a real total. If you want to take all these numbers and not look up whether or not they were from previous decades, if you really want to throw them all together, you have 8,878 reported deaths involving any vaccine that could technically be rounded up and put into a blame for this from October of 2019 forward. Blamable on a vaccine or anything vaccine-like or person merely making the claim. Out of over 500,000 dead, over 40 million sick, just in the United States. There are more people than that killed on the streets from drunk drivers per month, sometimes per week, depending on which state you're in. Never mind nationally. But this is what you have people telling you you have to concentrate on. Myocarditis and pericarditis reports 2,583. Again, those could be, and probably are if you looked them up, not associated with it. With any vaccine, by the way. And myocarditis and pericarditis, these aren't the deaths. The deaths reported is 8,878. But someone can take all these numbers that they could say happened within the time frame of the vaccine we're talking about and throw them together to make it look, well, this is terrible. And how many of these have been investigated? The VAERS, Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, isn't something that has a group that investigates these things. It's only if someone files a court claim. All they have to do is bring in some sort of paperwork where a doctor claims that they got a vaccine. And unless somebody wants to investigate it, there's no need for a court case. And unless they file a subsequent case, there is a need for it. The only reason I know anything about this is people who have children that had autism or Down syndrome or whatever, claiming, at one time Down syndrome was also claimed this way, claiming a connection between it and getting vaccines, because most kids get vaccines. It's the only thing they'll have in common, that most children get vaccines very early. It's the only medical thing, even vaguely, that most of these children had. And the other thing that a lot of them didn't have was a diagnosis before that of any developmental disabilities. Because they were too young. I mean, they're just kids. They're little babies and stuff. They don't know that they might have Down syndrome or some other developmental problem caused by some source. And inevitably it comes up, well, what causes it if it isn't mercury or whatever? Most of the time these children are born to parents that are older than the ideal age to have a child. There's a higher likelihood of very subtle and sometimes major birth defects. Well, there's an explosion of it. There's an explosion of women having children after 30. If you don't like hearing it, I'm sorry, I don't care. I agree with everyone out there, especially women, that want to have their own lives and deal with things. But I am going to say this very clearly. If you want to have a career or have no choice early in life, having a child as you get older increases their likelihood of having all sorts of medical problems. Not just autism. And you have to understand that. And you had better learn to accept it. And some of you out there are going to get angry at me, but you were told that by your doctor. And you're not being triggered or treated badly or told you can't be a feminist or whatever it is, or just a person who needed to survive and get along in life and maintain a job for a lot longer. Lots of people, not single women exclusively, not couples exclusively, lots of people, lots of women keep a job early in life and delay having a child. My advice to you is, if you're over 30, seriously consider adoption, because it reduces the likelihood of you ending up with someone that will be massively expensive to take care of. So you won't feel tempted to rationalize a reason to blame something that probably kept the kid from dying in the first place. Preventable childhood illnesses that can kill children are not a sentence of death or misery. And again, there isn't any evidence proving any of these connections. And just because this is the VAERS system is supposed to help people just get a payout and not have to go through court cases, doesn't mean you're right. It just means they threw up their hands and said, we're tired of dealing with it. And this originally started with actual real cases of contamination. That was all. Contamination of vaccines at one time. It's been around since the 90s because of that. Because actually people had been contaminated because the supply stream wasn't safe. This isn't the same thing. Jessica Rose and Matthew Crawford said it was, however, 150,000 underreported deaths from the vaccine. How did they multiply the deaths by the number 21, which is exactly what they did here? Anti-vax math they use is the following. Subtract the previous year's average number of background deaths, whatever that means, from 6,968 deaths reported in VAERS, and multiply it by an underreporting rate number they made up out of their butt. Then they discovered that's a number they discovered to create, literally just multiply it by 21. Matthew Crawford also told Reuters that most medical professionals aren't aware of VAERS, when of course they obviously are. Everybody knows about it. This is one of several times someone impressive had faked this piece of propaganda with the exact same way and numbers over many, many months, which means it hadn't changed from January of 2020 to 2 days ago. And also it hadn't changed in 2020 either. It's the same number, which means it's not caused by the vaccine, because the vaccine only existed after 2020. Right? It was 2021 when we got it. They lied. It's propaganda. Thank you. Have a good day. Good luck with that information.